About a month ago, I had 4 different conversations in a week with Muslims in my comments section and had some of the most difficult communication issues. They are excellent at speaking English, but the conversations go literally nowhere, as if we're having 2 different conversations. It comes down to communication styles about complex issues. We in the West strive very hard to be as direct and concise and short as possible when talking about complex issues. We can have both a reductionist and a holistic view of definitions and try and get to the meat of the problem, and if things aren't clear enough, we subsect it deeper. Higher thinking, at least in internet Muslims I have read and found websites for, it appears that thanks to the Quran, involves long, poetic, flowery rambles that sound very pretty but are hardly concise or easy to pin a point down on. In place of definitions, they will use a long example that they're often kind of vague on, or they just quote the Quran. Abstract concepts are incredibly difficult to discuss because the Quran isn't set up for the Socratic method or short, precise answers of back and forth questions and trade-offs. The more poetic you are, the deeper and more enlightened you must be, so attempting to use the Socratic method just kind of falls apart because there is no yes or no questions you can ask. It's always at least a paragraph that may or may not be filled with many deepities, as Daniel Dennett calls them, which means a phrase that on the face of it sounds really deep, but when you actually think about it is rather shallow and pedantic. It is also impossible to get them to stop quoting the Quran, as if that seems to make them feel deeper as well, even though you don't believe a word of it and it doesn't have anything to do with the topic at hand. I don't think they talk to their friends this way, but then I'm not around enough to know. I'm kind of in my own Western isolated bubble. I do not know if this is worse in Muslims coming from certain nations. They just so happen to have found me on YouTube. But communication with almost every Muslim I have communicated with on a complex level has been incredibly hard and nearly fruitless. As a person with mild Asperger's, it feels like I'm dealing with someone with a severe Asperger's who is obsessed with quoting poetry and holy verse and has no real interest with anything you have to say. The only response they know how to give is to switch to a verse or poem they know that is roughly related to what you have to say, that usually leaves you more confused than when you started because they gave you no context that they assume you should already know what they're talking about. They don't seem to actually care or have the ability to put themselves in your shoes so that they can clearly be understood. They seem to be more interested in asserting their own and their book's superiority as opposed to breaking things down and getting to the root of your confusion. But that may be because they clearly can't understand what you don't understand. They're kind of half-assed also about trying to convert you and save you from hell, and aren't driven to save your soul the way many Christians I know are, just telling you why you're wrong. They're kind of halfway between Jews and Christians, as they'll kind of proselytize and would like it if you converted because it affirms to them that the religion is the best, but if not, most of the Quran talks about the superiority of Muslims and the inferiority of non-Muslims, just like the ultra-Orthodox Jews love their chosen people status, and if we don't get it, we're just lesser beings that God has just blinded us from the truth because we turned away, but we turned away because we were blinded from the truth. I'm not quite sure. It really doesn't make sense, but it lets them feel superior to us. It's actually rather Calvinistic, believing that God has selected some people and others he hasn't to believe, and it's up to him to decide if you believe or not, yet at the same time it's up to me to believe. I don't really get it. Something to note about Islam is that most Muslims do not believe in killing unbelievers, especially civilians, and believe that any reference to that only refers to the unbelievers who attack them directly. And all of the calls for fighting for Allah in the Quran were all just aimed at people in that time, while Muhammad was alive, quite similar to the way Jews and Christians view the genocides done by Joshua, specifically because they were unbelievers, who was called a very righteous man in Hebrews, and we must all strive to be righteous. However, the denigration of non-believers does lend itself to bigotry, and also in the Hadith Sahih al-Bukhari, Ali had an atheist put to death and is considered one of the greatest sins of Islam. Even worse if you turned away from Islam. This kind of bigotry leads to counter-bigotry from non-Muslims, which cranks up tensions worse and prevents communication and integration. This bigotry and belief that we are like animals helps ISIS and Al-Qaeda treat us as pure evil, especially when we are attacking them. And every stray bomb or indiscriminate drone strike just adds fuel to their belief that we are heartless non-believers attacking them, and that jihad is against all the West, even innocent civilians, because none of us are innocent. Internet Muslims also seem to have no interest in knowing what you think, and instead just want to preach at you. I don't know how many times I had a page worth of rambling sentences in one comment on my channel on videos on Islam. They can't understand why I do not see the same beauty and love for the Quran that they have, just like an obsessed fan can't imagine that someone wouldn't like their obsession. And they seem to insist that beauty equals truth of their book, and claim there's no other holy book makes predictions, like people will deny what I say, or that God is one God, which clearly is not the case, but why bother actually reading other books when you have the best book already? They also fail to grasp that science pretty much says that beauty is almost 100% subjective, based on many things including your upbringing and past experiences. It's been repeated to me over and over again that I need to listen to someone read the Quran in Arabic, and I will read it in English at the same time, and the beauty and truth of it will just come through to me. I did, and with my Western-raised ears, it was like listening to a droning fly bumping against the window over and over again, really loud. But that does not discount the beauty perceived by someone raised with it. I can assure you there are many Western sounds we find emotionally uplifting that a non-Westerner will find annoying, unenjoyable, and just plain ugly. Because as science says, the best music is whatever happens to make you feel happy. It's actually a sign of stunted maturity not to be able to accept and understand that someone may not like whatever fan-obsessed thing you happen to like, and think there's something wrong with a person who can't see the beauty in whatever you find beautiful. I'm really trying hard to communicate, and at least get some points of understanding, but it's very difficult because our styles of complex discussion are so alien to each other. Once again, only the Muslims I've actually talked to. I wonder if early Catholics and Protestants and Jews had this problem when they immigrated to America, and hate was rampant. People coming together with completely different frames of reference and methods of thinking and communication. I will not stop trying because it is essential to long-term peace in the world, but boy is it going to be a long, hard slog. Hey there, thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked what you saw from my channel, please subscribe and donate to my Patreon. If you have evidence to counter what I say, please provide it. If you would like to see what I was doing with this channel 6 years ago, please click the links on the screen. Thank you so much.